All right, let's talk about Metroid with Horky. So overall, Horksies, what? I mean, would you recommend this game?
Yeah,
And who would you
definitely.
recommend it to?
I think. I mean, it's like it's a Metroidvania, so if you like those, it's pretty good. I mean, I think that's. I don't know if I would recommend it to somebody who's never really played a Metroidvania though.
Yeah, yeah, I think it definitely. Um, I would say that when you think of the downsides of Metroidvanias, getting lost, backtracking, slow progress, and what people always say when they talk about Metroid, and they go like, "Oh yeah, you feel alone and it's moody and atmospheric." I would say that this is probably the most accessible one in terms of I almost always felt like I knew exactly where to go, and it does a really good job of kind of pushing you out into places. And then thinking, okay, if it pops you out after a major moment and you're by an elevator, you should get on the elevator. And
Yeah,
there's a
that is true. Like it almost does it to a fault
yeah,
because
yeah,
like I remember at least at one point in the very beginning where I was like it sends you off to the like you finish the first area and you're about to go off to the second area and they actually stop you from being able to backtrack over and pick up some of the stuff you saw earlier that you thought you might be able to inspect.
right,
They actually like close off corridors with, like like rocks fall or something, and
yeah,
so they do thrust you along pretty well.
yeah. And there were sometimes where I'd finish one of those areas and I would go and it would seem like you should get into that elevator, but I would think, but I haven't totally checked all this out, and I would kind of backtrack to a point where that was a bit of an issue. And I eventually learned that you should just go forward and you'll eventually get to come
Hmm.
back. But I'd say the main thing I really liked about this was just how Samus felt a lot more like what I liked about Hollow Knight. It was more, it was really fun moving around. I will really praise this game on making the run the fastest she can move. Running should be the fastest, not dashing, not rolling around, not sliding, none of that crap. I don't want it to be like in Castlevania Symphony of the Night where it's the fastest to just do a backslide the whole time and it just looks ridiculous. I love that the running is fastest and she can sprint and go even faster.
Yeah, I was gonna say the whole thing where you can build up your shine spark is what the speedrunners are end up using.
Right. Oh yeah, I totally forgot about using the shine spark near the ending bits. That was fun too because with the shine spark, the really tough stuff was totally optional, and it really did feel like there was just enough stuff that I think like to the people who really love Metroid, what they love it for can be what scares the mainstream away. And I think that this was the most accessible because most of the really difficult stuff that could scare people away was still there to reward the hardcore fans, but it was totally optional, which I would imagine makes them feel even better about it because it feels like, oh, this was not many people are going to see this stuff.
Yeah, I 100%ed the game, and there were some places where I don't, and in fact, I don't even think it's as extreme as Metroid Fusion, from what I understand. Uh, but there are some parts, especially some of the Shine Spark challenges, that are just insane. Like the amount of stuff that forces you to do all these acrobatics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say, and then you have the Emmys, which I'd say for the most part was pretty successful. I think that it added a cool element of stealth and a bit of dread. And then it does that Pac Man thing of you fear this thing that you have nothing you can do against it except run, and then you eventually fully explore that level, complete it, get that piece, and you can turn around, and it's just a little satisfying mini game of being able to destroy it, but you still need to use a bit of strategy, and it's kind of its own little mini game of that shooting it long enough to burn down that first layer, and then charging up the shot as it's coming towards you, nice and slow. And there's just everything felt very finely tuned. You
I
know,
felt like the counter mechanic for Emmys were a little bit too tight, though.
oh yeah. That definitely felt like they didn't want you to counter it. It was more.
Yeah,
It just. But I think you're right. It was too tight to the point where you felt like it was pure luck almost.
like if it's easier to counter the end game boss than it is to counter one of the seven Emmys that you end up running into through the game. I feel like that's a little bit strangely balanced.
Yeah, that felt a bit that felt a bit kind of silly. There are so many abilities in this game, and that was also a bit of a challenge. You made a great point about that, where the game wants you to have, compared to Hollow Knight, where Hollow Knight you're choosing carefully what abilities you have. This one gives you every ability, which makes sense for the character.
Everyone all the time.
Yeah, which is a lot of coordination, and the game a lot of the times really requires you to be using all those abilities. And if you get one, save for the last boss, they want you to be incorporating that stuff, which is a good challenge. But yeah, it was like I definitely had to kind of go cross-eyed a little bit to make sure I was doing everything in terms of the aiming. That's something that I wouldn't have minded them change a little bit, like a little more forgiving with the aiming somehow, some kind of auto aim, or tweaking that a little bit, because it kind of sucks having to stop and aim. But I guess it all kind of works. It in the end, other than feeling a bit confused sometimes, especially in like getting stuck in the ball form, the challenge to me felt extremely fair. Would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it certainly, it challenges you. It pushes you to, well, maybe not to everybody's limits. I'm sure there's some superhumans out there who are far more capable than us, but yeah, it definitely pushes you to your limits, to the point where once you actually finish whatever it was you were doing, whatever boss fight or whatever, you feel very fulfilled, I think. Or at least I did.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that Nintendo does this so well, managing difficulty to be challenging, but rewarding and not unfair. You know what? Another thing I'll say is about the evolution of your abilities. I felt definitely, I didn't feel underpowered to begin with, but by the end of it, when you are flying through the air with unlimited power jumps, running through the water, able to shoot at everything, I was like, wow, this feels really incredible, but it doesn't feel too overpowered. You know, they manage to create challenges around that. I wonder if that's just, I mean, this game had an incredibly long development cycle, being abandoned earlier, so I think they really benefited from that. And then, of course, so the ambiance, what did you think of that, and the worlds and exploring?
Well, I think it's pretty traditional, like in terms of how Metroids have been. Like, you tend to get pretty OP at the end of it all once you've upgraded heavily. It contrasts quite well with Hollow Knight, which does not quite do that. You certainly do have more abilities at the end of Hollow Knight, but you're far more vulnerable, I think.
Yeah. I think with Hollow Knight, it was more of, it's so finely tuned. Because in Hollow Knight, you're making decisions of, do I want to have a slightly longer attack, and then give up some other really powerful things, and also I'm potentially learning a bad habit of relying on a longer attack, where this one was more of just, we're just going to give you everything, and it's all going to get better. And there was zero choice or sort of strategy with this one, whereas Hollow Knight, it was a bit more of a careful balance. I mean, I think overall, in terms of just the atmosphere and the aesthetics, I was pleased by it. I think it was more than adequate. Nothing super memorable, though.
Yeah, well, I was going to go back kind of what you were saying, like, and also just generally Hollow Knight offers you the option of making meaningful choices. Whereas this game, I don't think there really are many meaningful choices in this game. Not that it necessarily harms it, but it does set it apart from other games that might be able to do that better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of strangely linear. Where you think of them as more open, explorative games. You know what felt really good was the counters, the parrying. I'm a big fan of parrying in games, and they made the windows to that feel very fair, where it was always very obvious when you had to press it, but it was that tension of not wanting to sort of panic, press it too early, and then leave yourself exposed. Every time I missed a parry, I felt like it was completely my fault. But it was so satisfying when you're running through and you parry something and you get that big sort of cinematic smash, and then you get a ton of missiles and health, and the game just like really rewards you with a lot of energy and missiles. I'd be interested to talk to more of a hardcore Metroid person, and if this is to them like Metroid for babies.
Yeah, I wonder if that crowd has sort of moved on or found something else to play that scratches that itch.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I've tried Metroid games and bounced off them, and totally. I mean, you and I are both huge fans of Hollow Knight. I mean, I would definitely say Hollow Knight is better than this.
Oh yeah,
by far. I would go back to play Hollow Knight because I just love. When I think of Hollow Knight, I think of the really sweet and meaningful characters and environments, and the combat. I would say that
it's far more open too.
Yeah, it does feel like it's bigger, longer, more open. I'm doing more listening when I'm exploring because you're listening to those guys hum and have their own little language to find different spots.
This is open like if you had blinders on, right?
Yeah.
Technically, you can try to go that way, but it's there blocking you sometimes. And by the end of it, you're free to go everywhere, but
you don't want to at that point, unless you really. I mean, it is so cool that at one point you get the ability to find secrets, and it comes at a kind of a perfect point in the game when you would want to go all around and explore. I kind of, the way I was playing the game, kind of coming back to it and bouncing over to Silent Hill, I felt like that lost the opportunity for me. If I was only playing this game, then I probably would have used that opportunity to go around and really find everything. But yeah, so there was a bit of a learning curve to get. Like when you jump back into this game, it can be pretty challenging to remember all those commands and the muscle memory. It's fairly intuitive though.
One thing that you might take into account too, if we're just comparing this to Hollow Knight as well, is like the general time to beat.
Okay.
For you, we took roughly the same amount of time. I think I took like 12 hours, and you were a little over 13.
Yep.
And Hollow Knight, however, if you look on howlongtobeat.com, suggests that for the main story alone, it's 26 and a half hours. So more than double in some cases.
And I would say a bit more variety too in enemies and bosses.
So it's just interesting to think about, because this is it feels like this to me feels like more of an arcade experience.
Yeah.
Like it's streamlined in a lot of ways. It's streamlined, but it also has a lot of complexity in the controls, which I guess is part of the streamlining, because then they don't have extra menus for swapping stuff around. They didn't have to even consider the fact that like, oh, but what if they're equipping this instead of this, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So like they're able to just have everything just streamlined in a way that they know exactly how these people are going to be approaching this. Although I say that, but then I do remember that you're able to find some secrets in the game for items you don't have yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like you remember you and I both encountered that when we were playing. Yep.
Yeah, it's I think in terms of all the mechanics working together, it's incredibly well done. Everything, like the pacing of it, when they choose to give you things, and it was a very nice gradual rise of sort of difficulty, of the tension. It was paced incredibly well. There were just when you really wanted a cutscene, you'd have a little bit of a story break, and then they start coming a lot faster throughout. But it was, I would say that was probably one of its strengths. I'd say like the strongest parts of it are how good it feels to run around, jump and shoot and parry, and the agility, and then as well as the pacing, and not
the checkpoints were very fair.
Oh my God, were they ever? Yeah, they were fantastic, because even if you hadn't saved, unless you turned off your Switch, they would give you this like really very, very generous after death replays, which makes it more fun to experiment, and like I never really felt frustrated at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably helps to eliminate, because I know you're not a fan of backtracking, right?
No.
And I think that kind of helps to eliminate that being much of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Hollow Knight, you would encounter areas like that where you'd have to backtrack, and there's like no way around it a lot of times there.
Yeah, and it can feel frustrating if you're not sure you're supposed to be backtracking. You know, anytime you're traversing and you're not sure this is the right way, it can feel twice as long or 3 times as long. And you know, not to say that Hollow Knight is a perfect game, even though I think it is a masterpiece, if that makes sense.
As close as perfect gets, at least for me.
Because I did bounce off Hollow Knight the first time. I think that.
Oh yeah.
Until you get that ability where you can do that big long dash, I felt like I was a little confused. I wasn't able to get enough momentum in that game. But then once I went back to it and it clicked, I was all in. It was funny. I think I played it on the PS4 and bounced off it, and then I got it on the Switch and it worked. I had to switch it up. Boo. All right. I mean, but yeah, as a standalone game, I would, as not a Hollow Knight comparison, I would definitely recommend this to anybody who has not enjoyed a Metroid or a Metroidvania before, because this is baby's Metroid, but still challenging.
Do you feel like it's a good $60 buy?
Yes, definitely. I felt really satisfied with it, and I don't know what it would be like to play again. I'm probably never going to play it again, but I definitely got enough value out of it because they were already kind of reusing some enemies and bosses in a way that didn't get tiring. But if you had to pad it out to 25 hours or 20 hours or 30 hours, I think they really. I mean, how much longer would have taken them 20 years to make this? Yeah, I would have. I would have felt that just became a big drag, and I might not have ever finished it. So yeah, I'm quite happy paying full price for it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean it's really tough. Like I feel like if you're on a budget, I'd probably say get something like Hollow Knight because it's going to be cheaper and you're going to get a lot out of it. But if you really want to play a Metroidvania, especially one that actually is Metroid, then yeah, it's perfect. Perfectly good game to play.
Well, there you have it. Perfectly good game to play. Thanks, Horky.